Ma'am, we are live.
Hello and very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and well-wishers. On behalf of Herbal India, I, Rakhi Bakshi, welcome you all. As you know that we mounted this show to address gender and social contemporary and current affair issues, but due to the deadly disease that we are faced with right now, the pandemic that is in front of us, we decided to hold it daily and 6 to 7 p.m. almost daily. We are coming to you, talking to experts, people who understand the subject, the stakeholders, the authorities, the voices which really matter, whether it's from Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast especially, we are bringing you those voices, also voices that sometimes do not find the right kind of space. We are really trying to bring that out. And in that series today, I'm really delighted to present to you another very dynamic political and social leader, somebody who's been a member of parliament from Bolangir, Odisha, Mr. Kalikesh Singh Dev. I welcome you. We are going to talk about what's happening not only in Odisha, but nationally. What is it that we are faced with? What is it that we can do? What is it that can be worked out? And we thought, why not understand it from a policymaker, somebody who's seen it very closely, somebody who still works very closely with communities. And that's where you are. Mr. Dev, welcome to the show. Can you hear me?
So please unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Rakhi. Thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, so, the present times that we are in, of course, in Odisha, because a lot of people are talking about Delhi, Mumbai, then maybe other states. Maybe we hear a little lesser about Odisha. So first of all, how would you really look at the current situation, the second wave of COVID that we are struck with, the kind of situation which is right now in Odisha? I know that whatever we keep hearing, reading, that the state government is at it. There are things in place in terms of supporting medically, creating other health infrastructure practices. How would you look at it, Mr. Dev?
Look, Rakhi, I think when Delhi and Mumbai got the first onset of the second wave, naturally it hit the headlines faster. And national media outlets are based on these places. This is where urban India is. This is where the corporates are, the political centers are. So naturally it got the headlines in the papers. And of course, the situation was very bad then. Things have since then tapered off. But what's happened over the last couple of months is that this disease has now gotten into rural India. Something which hadn't happened in the first wave. Largely rural parts of India were saved for whatever reason. And this has gotten mass into rural India. And you find, at least in places in my constituency in Bolangir, there are villages which have 80%, 90% positivity. So it's there in a much bigger way in Odisha, in the rest of India and rural India than people are assuming it is. Now, the fact is 85% of the people are asymptomatic or don't even get to know. It's only if somebody dies or somebody has massive symptoms and then testing happens in those areas, that's when things start coming out. In rural India, as vis-a-vis urban health infrastructure, rural India is much more stretched. So a district like mine in Bolangir would have, maybe 20 or 25 or 30 ventilators in the entire district. And we have a population of 15 lakh. We've had testing increase there. The labs are going full. The ICUs are going full. Oxygen is being supplied even at home and at various primary health centers as well as tertiary health centers. But even then, in a 15 lakh population in a district, with let's say 200 beds or 300 beds available for ICU or whatever, it's not easy. The population is much bigger, and what you have seen out of the UP and Bihar example is that a lot of deaths go unaccounted. I mean, you've heard the stories about bodies floating in the Ganga because nobody is willing to do the Antim Karjagam of that. Yeah, so it's extremely sad, and it's really caught us unaware. I mean, we had a year to prepare. I don't think in any way if we had gone for full preparation also, we would still be stretched in fighting this disease. especially in rural India.
Mr. Dev, it's very crucial and important to talk to you also because the kind of region you represent. You've been active, you've been a member of parliament, you've seen politics, it's all around you, still, look at things, both socially, politically. You are working, I know, very closely with communities, as you've done in the past also, which I observed. What would you say is that how we are suddenly struck with this infrastructure challenge? And in the region, in Odisha that you are, what would you say?
Look, firstly, nationally, the number of people who are sort of who need healthcare services just far outstrips any healthcare infrastructure that we have. And not only nationally, even the US has the same problem. So the problem does exist. When you have 5% people going in for healthcare or 2% people going for healthcare, you can deal with it. When you're looking at 10, 15, 20% of the entire population which need healthcare, together, then the problem becomes a lot bigger. And as I said before, rural India faces a bigger brunt of it. Now, we should have been better prepared. I mean, we had 1 year, we started taking it easy. For whatever reason, our vaccination program has gone very, very slow, especially after the first 3 or 4 months. There seems to be some disconnect between governments. And in this case, I would primarily point out the central government because that was the one which was carrying out the vaccination program and the manner in which the 2 vaccine companies in India have responded. I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't have augmented their infrastructure to start mass producing vaccines by now, which is the only deterrent to this disease. I mean, let's face it, there's no cure. Vaccination can help at least reduce the severity of the disease. And the other thing that really we require is a lot of oxygen logistics. We have oxygen in the country, especially Odisha does, because Odisha has a lot of steel plants which produce oxygen. It's a question of getting it out there. It's a question of having enough oxygen cylinders. It's a question of having enough beds. I don't think, we are short of doctors as other states are, in fact, maybe a little more. So really our healthcare system should have evolved after the first wave to meet the second wave by having stricter protocols, massive vaccination, larger logistics for oxygen. And these are not very big investments. Even if the second wave hadn't come, the government should have taken the risk. And the problem is when you leave it to a very bureaucratic system to run these kind of policies without political leadership. The risk taking comes from political.
For argument's sake, somebody would say, come up with innovative ideas, do your bit. So, for example, today we are talking about rural areas, how villages are being affected at this stage when we are talking. Come up with ideas, do your bit, go to the people, tell them. I mean, not really literally because social distancing is important, but how to connect and have that trust back into leaders and say that how we are bringing communities together, how we are working on basic health infrastructure, let's say district hospitals to PHCs, and the entire tier of health, structure and management.
Rakhi, there is a complete absence of political leadership in this. Honestly, what's happened, political leaders can go and create awareness, but that's not, I think a lot of people are actually aware about the disease now, and they're even buying masks and wearing masks in the villages, which is a very good thing. But what needs to happen is that a protocol needs to be formulated for treatment of disease, diagnosis of disease. When ASHA workers need to be involved from a grassroots level to identify those who need to be hospitalized or be taken for diagnosis, and those who do not, even just a pure oximeter is enough for them to be kept at home isolation if they are asymptomatic, let's say, or mild symptoms. If there is slightly severe symptoms or if there's slight dropping of oxygen, they need to consult a doctor. So by now, we should have had a mechanism where we can actually do telemedicine or teleconsultation with the villages instead of trying to bring people from across 100 kilometers or 50 kilometers. And this system needed to have been involved by the central government because they were the ones coming up with all the protocol. Now, let's give them the doubt that this is a completely new phenomena. Every country was struggling with it. You heard at some point in time there was plasma was a therapy, then you heard remdesivir therapy. Now you hear that both don't matter. It's primarily oxygen and some sort of a corticosteroid in the second week to control, viral load or inflammation. So protocols are still being evolved. And But even then,
so tell
the
us
system
what
will
is the
deliver these
situation there.
protocols.
Tell us what is the situation there. We are also witnessing, and you are also equally, I think, watching it. These confusing statements that you're also talking about is that what to follow when vaccination comes, whether there is adequate availability, whether the duration of one dose to another, what exactly it should be, how much is there, how much one should avail of, or whether plasma is now out of the protocol of health guidelines. I mean, what would you say about the right kind of messaging which should come through?
It's utter confusion because doctors are still prescribing plasma. Patients are still asking for plasma, and you can't blame them because they're trying to do everything in their power to save their loved and dear ones. Marta kya nahi karta jaise bolte hain. But there is a lack of clarity, and the ICMR has come up with some guidelines. It's been late to react. But again, the health ministry of both the center and the states need to be better correlated, to have some sort of a sync between them to come up with practical ethos so there's a second wave now. And can we deal with the second wave? I think we are, hopefully we are in the plateau on the top of the second wave, and hopefully things should start becoming better now. But there will be a third wave. And they say, maybe children will be affected more in the third wave. Maybe there's a possibility. So are we looking at things like that? Are we looking at having maybe some sort of a pediatric intensive care unit in every district hospital? Are we looking at having pediatric ventilators put in every district hospital? Because these are children. Let's not forget that children will not have access to vaccines for maybe next 1.5 to 2 years.
Yeah, in fact,
there is serious issues
this morning about children's health, which is actually now our prime concern as to how we are looking at it, how geared we are to look at this very young population.
No, it's an extremely worrying situation for children. They've been home for a year or over a year, no school. There's an impact on their mental health. They don't have access to vaccines. Vaccines are just being tested on children in India. Whereas in US, I think above 12, they've allowed the Pfizer vaccines for children. Until a cure comes, and until a vaccine is made available to children, they're in real threat. And what I understand is the disease is mutating to impact younger and younger people as we go on. Maybe it's also a byproduct of the older people getting vaccinated. So you really have to start your vaccination program. And the real problem which came about in the vaccination program, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the governments, or in this case, Government of India, because they recently only allowed state governments to start procuring vaccines, the Government of India didn't put up enough of an order to ensure that there was sufficient supply. Or let's say the US and the UK and EU, they currently have maybe 150% of vaccines in stock. It doesn't matter. I mean, somebody in the government needs to take a call. Say, look, it doesn't matter. I'm willing to put in 2,000 crores to make vaccines, or 1,000 crore to make vaccines. And if you think that the disease is going down and we don't need vaccines, and tomorrow, in case the vaccines are not being used, and I'll be put to blame, and somebody might question me, or CBI or ED might question me as to why I gave that money. That's, so that the bureaucratic sort of policy making comes into play. That to me has been the biggest problem with this disease.
So I have a couple of points. I mean, in fact, more than a couple that you're really providing us here. But I would like to, in a fairly balanced manner, also would like to understand from you, having been again the part of the system, is that what are the points that we need to look at? It's not about blame. It's not about now saying that, oh, we are late and things like that. But what are these suggestions? Very valid suggestions. We have experts every day writing, telling us things. How much we do understand that, how much can we take it ahead is important. What would you say? What are some of these very crucial suggestions from your point of view, from the region that you represent also, which you think is very crucial and should be taken?
Absolutely. I mean, let's take the statistics. About 85% of those infected are asymptomatic. Only 5 to 10% need medical care, out of which 5% need hospitalization or something like that. Let's assume these statistics hold true. In which case, you've got to actually have much more provision of beds, ICUs and ventilators in district areas. You need to have a much stronger system. You can't bog down those beds with those who are mildly affected. You've got to have a much stronger system of diagnosis at the village level in using the ASHA, giving the ASHA worker the tools, let's say an oximeter, let's say have an iPad or something to consult with doctors in the block headquarters or in the primary health centers, where they can quickly identify those who may be requiring hospitalization or medical attention. Let's start from the village level. So in a village of, let's say, 400 people, if the ASHA worker on a weekly basis or a daily basis is able to identify 20, then she should have access to a doctor where they can consult. Once that is done, then testing needs to take place. And within 24 hours, if testing reports come positive, these people need to get a hospital bed. And the first thing, and the biggest thing they require is oxygen, because the oxygen level starts falling very quickly.
Since you mentioned ASHA workers, on our show, I really feel delighted in saying that we had ASHA workers before actually the second wave started. We had them talking to us, and some of their challenges, of course, we also listened to, which also includes that, how their payments are really not that adequate. One needs to maybe work on that or give a thought to that. And there are a couple of other challenges. But having said that, talking about the number, the strength of doctors to paramedics, to the kind of training they have, to the kind of availability in rural areas, especially where the need is much more crucial and pronounced. What would you say that do we really need to look at health system with a different kind of prism altogether now at this stage?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if there's any time to sort of augment and look at health systems with much more priority and maybe using much more technology and empowering the ASHA workers, or frankly those who are the grassroots, even if it's the primary health centers or the secondary health centers which exist in block and panchayat levels, this is the time to empower them. You can see how a virus like this, a pandemic like this, can spread in matter of days and weeks and months across the country and create havoc. So you need to have a very trained sort of a infrastructure which is quick for diagnosis, quick for identification, and quick to escalate it to the next level. I mean, I don't expect to start doing surgeries, but if I can train my ASHA workers to identify where the problem is, and in time escalate the problem to the block level or the district level, so that those who are more trained in medical practices can take over and ensure that there is enough life-saving skills in that entire, in that entire chain, then I save a life. Otherwise, in villages, people are dying and it's being uncounted for. And I'm getting calls every day, at least 5 or 10 cases every day from my area where people have died. Some have been proclaimed as COVID deaths. Some may not have been proclaimed as COVID deaths for whatever reason. Some haven't even gone to hospital. So there is an issue. There is a limit to how much you can test. The labs are going full in even the districts. And it is an issue in the entire country and even in parts of Orissa and the western borders of Orissa, which are neighboring Chhattisgarh and Bengal and Jharkhand. Where a lot of trade and travel happens between these districts. So we are facing a problem in these tribal areas and western areas.
Okay, since you mentioned that, another aspect which we need to talk about is the whole status of economy. And when we say that the lower strata, the migrant labor, which every time, we missed out last time into a great measure. This time, of course, also we need to look at the labor class, the migrant laborers, their inflow, outflow, how we can sustain economy at the bottom level. These are also the questions. And I know that, your stint, you've tried to look at these things also, and I'm sure that you have some insights there.
Yeah, so my district, Balangir, has a huge migrant labor issue. We have almost 2 lakh to 2.5 lakh people who go out every year and they're normally for very low paid jobs. So it's normally for brick making and garment sewing and stuff like that. And last year when the economy was shut down suddenly overnight, these people faced a huge problem. I was in touch with at least 15,000 to 20,000 people who wanted to come back to the district, whose job just stopped overnight. After a few days, even the factory owner stopped, giving them food and shelter because they weren't allowed to work. So luckily, this time around, this issue has not repeated itself. At least where these migrants are, let's say the construction workers or brick makers, they are still in those factories or in those sites and working. So thank God that work has not stopped. The economy has not come to a complete halt, but we will come across a situation where we'll be having a huge economic downturn in the coming 1 or 2 years. The fact that we are unable to meet this health crisis, and we will have to spend to meet this health crisis, and this is an investment which has a long-term return. I mean, you unless you invest in creating health infrastructure today, and which will start paying dividends after 3 or 4 years. But in the meantime, you need to have an investment. So I'm not sure that the government has made up its mind to do that as yet or not. And I certainly hope it does, both central governments and all state governments. But what I am really hoping for is a complete overhaul of in the manner in which migrant labor is looked at and treated. Much more record of where they are going to work, what conditions they are in, and much more oversight and regulation as to how they are being treated. The biggest problem we have with our migrant labor is that they sometimes get exploited because they are at the mercy of their maliks wherever they go. And every year we get a lot of calls of distress. In fact, even today on Twitter, I've got calls of some migrant labor families in distress in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
One of the
This
things
is a huge
in
problem.
the beginning mentioned about this whole federal structure and how everyone can coordinate. Taking that coordination bit a little further, which of course I focus each time on, is that how everyone can create that change. So, for example, right from political representatives to the bureaucratic system to communities, and now the social workers are getting joined in, the volunteers, the NGOs. The experts, how their insights can be used. So do you think that coordination needs to be stronger?
Certainly, I think that coordination has become stronger over the last few years. In fact, earlier on, there was no record of people going out and where they were, whether they came back, and whether they got the money that they were promised for when they went out for migration. One way to break this chain of distress migration, as I call it, is to increase the level of skills with these migrant labor so that they can command a better premium when they go outside to work. I mean, labor migration by itself is not bad, but the manner in which it happens in some parts of Odisha, including my district, is extremely distressing. It's almost like a bonded labor movement. So you need to rescue these people. You need to have an oversight, but ultimately you need to have the government and the district administration and the states in which they go to provide a shield of social security and protection and legal protection for them. Tomorrow, if a migrant labor gets raped, or if somebody gets murdered, or if they don't get their money, they get cheated, or they get beaten up, they should be able to go to the police, and the police should react. And I have to tell you, I had some very good experiences with the police in Tamil Nadu when incidents like this occurred last year when the labor migrant crisis happened. And some of the other states also. I found chief ministers to be very, very helpful. And including our state, which actually got back a lot of migrant labor back into the state and still managed to contain the coronavirus impact in the first wave. But the second wave round is not a question of labor migrants coming back with this disease. This disease is just much more, it's much more viral, it's much more prevalent, it's much more infectious. And they say that it's just going to get worse until we start vaccinating.
Okay.
So the quick answer is vaccinate. Vaccinate the laborers.
Sure, true. 2-3 things. Talking about dignity in a very broader sense. Of course, we are talking about how people, are losing lives and how we should actually depart. So the manner in which I'm talking about, in certain areas, we saw dead bodies just lying, unaddressed. The whole dignity being given in terms of the ambulances, the medical support, how it should have come in a transparent manner. People have written about it. Social media is abuzz with all these stories also. How would you really look at how we address dignity at this point of time is also very important.
I think it's sad that the life of an Indian person has such less value for in our society. I mean, we've seen deaths in the most horrific fashion, sometimes in the past, but certainly in this disease. You've seen the bodies in the Ganga, you've seen photographs of half-eaten corpses because they've been left on the road. You've seen fathers and children carrying bodies on their shoulders. But these are cases which exist, and I'm not saying that the governments don't don't do work normally. In all cases are like that. No. I mean, I'm sure the governments in every state and the country are trying their best to meet these exigencies, but there are cases which happen like that. It's really unfortunate. And I think as a society, as a polity, and as a government, if we accept these issues and we accept that these problems exist, then only can we start dealing with them. Unfortunately, what's happening now with a lot of governments is that they're trying to hide these issues. And that does no good. I mean, if I have too many dead, I may take another day to cremate them or bury them, whatever the case may be. But if I start throwing them in the Ganga, then they will surface in another place. And that does no good for that government or for our credibility as a country. We really need to accept the problems we have, acknowledge the mistakes we've made, and then go on to rectify them so that we can deal with the problems. Hiding our heads in the sand like an ostrich does no good, and you cannot keep marketing yourself. I don't think this is the time. Unfortunately, every government in the country got into that whole trap of patting themselves in the back, sometimes late December, early January this year, when they said we've dealt with Corona and Corona is over and we're the only country with such great stats. And this is every state government, every central government agency is doing that, every central government minister is doing that. And suddenly, within 1 month or 15 days, we got slammed with a second wave. So we really need to accept the mistakes we made, acknowledge the situation to be able to deal with it, and accept reality. Unless we do that, we're never going to be able to deal with reality. We're always going to be pushing things around the corner, shoving bodies into the Ganga, or just having vaccination program with no supply.
Talking about one section which of course we need to ask is and I'm sure that you have had your insights on this as well even earlier, is about women. At this in these kind of crisis situations, pandemic, women face a lot of challenges, whether they seem to be sometimes vulnerable, looking for medical support. At home, they have domestic problems, abuse, violence, which they don't know how to address at times, where to go. What would you say about trafficking happens, sexual harassment happens, which are sometimes subtle, it's all suppressed. How would you really look at also addressing those concerns?
Well, a fragile situation in a normal environment in India for women is extremely, extremely worrying. And the women are subject to all that you said and even more. There's a lot of abuse, sometimes at home, sometimes outside at places of work. There's eve teasing, and there's generally it's felt that there is lesser security for women in India than in other countries. It's probably true. There are a lot of unreported cases which go on. But having said that, this pandemic does make it worse. Ultimately, let's not forget that now in my home, my wife spends time with the children in the morning, teaching them in their schools or online programs or whatever. And I'm sure that happens in one way or the other in every home where they are locked down. Then the women look after the homes and the houses. In most of rural India, they also do a lot of labor in the fields, which I'm sure they're still being subject to. And there is a lot of violence and frustration which comes in times when people are scared. And there's a lot of cases where men actually take it out on women. So the sensitization of the police structure and of the social security net towards women has to be doubly enforced in pandemics such as this. A much more stringent monitoring and much more stringent action needs to be taken on even small cases of abuse of women. And you've got to make an example in that local area.
Truly appreciate those thoughts. In fact, now I come to education of children. And at this time that we're talking about, there are voices that are saying that what happens to class 12th exams. In fact, we also partner with Policy Center General Miranda House, which is a all-girls college in Delhi. And in fact, I must say that Amrita Satpathy has joined from Bhubaneswar, who also teaches. I don't know whether Amrita has any question and she would like to ask Amrita. But yes, would you like to ask anything about education? Amrita? Anyway, I think she joined in. So what happens to that? I mean, again, a sector which is very crucial. what would be the suggestions? You see, giving advice suggestion is also easier. People say that keep aap bhashan de ke chale jate hain. How to work on ground, how to create solutions, how to reach out, how to provide support is also important. What would be your thoughts on that?
I've been advocating the issue of education for children and the issue of children in this pandemic to a large extent, apart from, of course, the usual issues of vaccination and medical attention, etc. I think children will be the biggest losers because of this pandemic. Adults like you and me, Rakhi, will have a year or two of discomfort, and once we get vaccinated and things start becoming normal, we'll be back on our feet, getting back to life as usual. But children at this age are missing out some very crucial years, and we are lucky that our children are in schools or colleges where they can access online education, and there is some semblance of education going on. But in most of rural India, and correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't had a system evolved as yet which could actually reach out to children and educate them even during this pandemic. So naturally, governments are scared of opening schools, especially in the middle of this massive rural wave. That's completely understandable. But this whole thing has been going on for over a year. There's no reason why governments across the board wouldn't have come together to create online teaching modules, to create online community-based teaching modules, to ensure that even just a television is accessed as a medium for teaching. I mean, I'll give you an example. They have 15 or 16 news channels in Odisha. There's no reason why these channels couldn't be asked to give 2 hours of their time to communicate to children of a certain class in various channels, and devise a method where an online system is communicated. So at least some semblance of education is imparted. Currently, what's happening is that these kids are at home, and what I fear is that the situation becomes so bad that kids start dropping out. And there are some reports that we may actually lose 10% to 20% of children who've been enrolled in school because they've dropped out for 2 years, they're working in fields, they either don't want to go back or the parents don't allow them to go back because of financial problems. So there's going to be a huge impact on education in this sector. And I think even now the government is talking about doing something on an online platform. It's very easily done. I fail to understand why it's taking so long and why it should be such an effort. It doesn't cost too much money.
Mm-hmm. Another thing which gets spoken about is that what are our learnings? So, for example, we are looking at other countries. There's a global challenge, but how fast are we learning? How fast are we learning the best practices? Are we trying to also model ourselves? These are also some of the questions which come in. What would you say? I mean, I'm sure that you've had the opportunity to earlier go to delegations, and there are things that I'm sure at this stage also you would like to do based on your own learnings. Would you like to share something?
I would, rather than compare ourselves to other countries where there's a huge difference in the economy and in the level of development and the challenges that those countries face because of the population of India, etc., etc. I think what has been missing to the largest extent, in my opinion, in India's fight against Corona has been the use of technology. I mean, here we are a country, we pride ourselves on giving software services and apps and all kinds of technical and technological solutions to the world. But we have not been able to adapt any of that to meet the challenges of diagnostics in the rural and in urban area. Number 2, vaccination. Number 3, even simple things like identification of beds. If a patient in Delhi, and you would know, or Bombay a few months ago, if somebody fell in and had to be hospitalized, they had to physically call every hospital or arrive there to be told bed hai ki nahi hai. But there's no reason why we can't have one technological platform which can identify where beds are and what the conditions are and what facilities are available. I mean, it's basically an aggregating platform. Number 3, communication between new breakthroughs of treatment versus what is being practiced on the ground. As we discussed a little while ago, even today there are hospitals in Orissa and other places which are prescribing plasma or prescribing remdesivir. I think yesterday I saw a statement by, was it the Chief Minister of Telangana or Andhra Pradesh? I'm forgetting where, or I think it was one of the Chief Justice or the High Court saying how many remdesivir injections are available or not. I mean, there is a huge disconnect between various arms of the government, and this is primarily because of a lack of a communication platform. So as a country, if we have a technological platform which can help us identify quicker where the solutions lie in terms of beds or oxygens or even injections, antibiotic injections or whatever. If we have a platform which communicates to doctors directly about what the prescribed treatments are, so that issues and complications like black funguses don't happen, which people are saying because it happened because of the novel use of steroids, apart from the diabetic issues that people are facing. So, there's just
in fact,
correct treatment, we communicate strongly.
The onset of black fungus, and we had some senior doctors talking about it. So in fact, this whole second wave also is posing new challenges in various forms. So for example, every day now, in fact, somebody talked about white fungus today. So every day, I think the virus is changing its behavior in terms of affecting in multiple ways. What would you say also about this whole challenge that we are faced with, and every day, scientifically, medically, we are struck with some other challenge which we had never thought about. And that's what some people would say, that there is something which we are all got really surprised with,
No, absolutely. Absolutely, Raki, this virus is brand new and people are discovering new things about it every day. And I'm not blaming the doctors or the government for not being able to discover what the solution is or what the cure is. No, that will take time. The viruses are mutating, the solutions will mutate, the treatments they will evolve, the treatment will evolve, but ultimately, not every doctor or every hospital has to start the wheel from the start. Nobody has to reinvent the wheel from the start. We have labs which are working on solutions or which are working on how to treat the disease correctly, even in its evolving phase. Treatment keeps evolving, and that process, once it's identified, once it is established, needs to be communicated quickly through technology to all the hospitals and all the doctors. You can't have one doctor giving plasma, the other doctor giving remdesivir, and the third doctor giving steroids, whereas none of these things matter. The fact is that we haven't been able to create a platform which joins all our medical practitioners together. Similarly, you could have had a platform for your ASHA workers by now, where you give them a smartphone and you get them on touch.
You talked about their involvement. Now, I think you also said it, talking about the third wave. I don't know how, when you talk about vaccination, whether we are completely secure there, but we are talking about the third wave. And somebody would say, oh, we are prepared, oh, we are preparing. How easy it is to say that, and how tough it is to actually face it.
It's very easy to say that vaccines will be there and you'll give it to them. At this point of time, the only solution that we have is a vaccine, and we are running out of stocks everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, so suddenly, a month ago, the Prime Minister said now state governments can buy the vaccine themselves. After 1 year of not placing the requisite amount of orders, where will state governments suddenly find the capacity to buy the vaccine? You have 10 or 12 state governments, including my state government of Odisha, who coming up with global tenders. But they'll all be going to the same person, the same Mr. Sputnik or the same Mr. Pfizer, and saying, give us vaccines. We'll possibly be trying to outbid each other. That doesn't make sense in today's day and age. If the government would have allowed the state governments to import the vaccines on day one, that would have made sense, because apart from what is being produced in India, they could have possibly booked some orders with Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer or Sputnik or whatever. In today's day and age, I mean, it's just a question of raising the prices on it. I find the whole vaccination process quite funny.
How would you look at one of the ministers saying actually that we should give chance to more companies to produce vaccines?
Sure, you have tools in your hand, such as waiving off the patents. You can actually have forcible, extrapolation of the technology and let the people, like I think Mr. Gadkari said today or yesterday, was it, that let the people take the technology and pay them some royalty for producing the vaccines. The government should ensure a larger production base and let the companies who've patented it or have had some involved funding into R&D, let them get some money out of it. I don't think anybody defies the fact that people should earn some money out of it, but they can't be cheating the public and they can't be holding the lives of the Indian public to ransom
Okay,
So that's really very beneficial.
talking about the region you are in, Kalikesh, would you like to talk about Bolangir as to what is your wish list for the region? How do you want to see things improving? What is the bit that you're also adding up?
So as far as I understand about my district of Balangir, tests are running at maximum capacity now. I've had it increased about 3 or 4 times in the last month, but we still need to maybe quadruple it in many ways. We need a lot more COVID isolation centers and oxygen cylinders in the district I mean, at this point in time, we are being able to meet most of the requirement. But in case the wave increases, and in case it gets more widespread, in case the third wave comes, and what I would really like to see in my area is to have a pediatric NICU, neonatal pediatric NICU, which addresses COVID in young children or younger children when the situation arises, because ICU and ventilators are suited only to a certain kind of size and scale of adult. If it comes to children, you need a lot more different medical devices. So I think a lot more focused attention needs to be there. I honestly think governments need to stop worrying about roads and bridges today and other things and focus on health and education and things which matter, which can save lives.
Okay, somebody just opined and said that, now we also need to understand how governments have to be citizen-centric much more than ever before. What would you say about that?
I would love to agree with him or her, whoever said that. But unfortunately, unless these issues become core to the voting pattern of India's politics, unfortunately, things will slip back into the same. So tomorrow, if in UP, people still vote on religion or on the mandir or on caste, and they do not vote because they've seen their loved ones dying or crying for hospitals or they've seen dead bodies in the Ganga, then the politicians of that state will focus on religion and caste and the mandir or whatever else, which gets them votes. Similarly, in my state of Orissa, which doesn't have religion and caste as a major factor in its politics, even here, if our voters want more of better education, better hospital care, more involved governments which focus on direct citizen contact, as you are suggesting or that person is suggesting, I would be much happier. But unfortunately, if people still vote for other extraneous factors, then things won't change. So I'm hoping that yes, the voter will force politics to change. The voter will force governments to change.
Okay. Today only we just saw that the ICMR is saying that now home isolation kits will be there with support in testing in a rapid manner. So there are solutions coming in where people want people to equip themselves with their own medical needs. How would you look at that idea?
Yeah, great. It should have happened a year ago. I mean, home isolation kits are not very difficult. A certain level of oxygen support also is not very difficult, even at home. It needs to be facilitated. It needs to be monitored and regulated. People need to be told or coached about how to use these things. Much more difficult in rural India than it is in urban India. Somebody reached out to me from the US recently saying that we have a saliva testing kit, which you can give you a 15-minute or 20-minute result, and which is 100%, which doesn't have any errors. But in which government do we allow, which government will take the risk of buying these kits? The problem is again that, most governments will now try and save, not get into situations where they're accused of corruption or accused of wasting money. So no government will buy an experimental technology or a kit hoping it works. And that's where political leadership needs to come. And I think today's day and age, you need to have much stronger political leadership, which tells the governments or the bureaucrats in whichever area they are, let's experiment it. The people are saying that this works. This is the benefit we'll get. Let's experiment. If it works, we'll escalate it exponentially. But unfortunately, I don't see that risk-taking attitude coming in even now.
Okay, some of the final questions, but so let's say a person would be having ideally 3 kind of challenges, especially in your kind of region. I mean, in Orissa, we know that certain districts have been fighting even for survival in the sense of how they fight hunger, how they fight poverty. So that's an economic challenge. There are challenges of social security and now the health security. How would you really look at, a person dealing with at this stage so much of challenge altogether?
I feel for the people of my area and my state. It's a largely tribal and sparse villages, low per capita income, menial laborers, farmers which don't have irrigation. These are tough times for them. Some of them may have spent their lifetimes earning and looking after or for the cure of their loved ones who may have been afflicted by COVID. Some of them may not have gone to work for over a year because their work or the companies have been shut down, or they're unable to travel for whatever reason. They're scared to go to other states right now. Or generally, the economic downturn is there's a demand hasn't picked up, production hasn't picked up as much as it needs to, and it probably won't for the next couple of years. But this year, last year, this year, and possibly the next year will be really tough years for the people of our area. I think this is where a strong social security net needs to come in. I mean, Odisha has some very good things in that context. We give free rice, we give free education to children. You have a lot of social security net for women. We have a very strong self-help group network in Odisha, which sometimes work well. So government needs to augment it. It's not about doling out money because the money will get used up very quickly. It's about creating systems. So if you have a self-help group which is active, how do you link them with markets? How do you link them with finance? It's not really about just freebies. I think that whole approach of politics of giving freebies and working with the political class it's okay, but it doesn't resolve real issues. And the reason that these issues remain where they are is because there's not been a significant impact. So the governments need to have a much more focused attention on how to have long-term solutions and not just short-term benefits to these places. But yes, these are tough times for people of our area. But let me also say that we in our area we've been dealing with pandemics such as malaria. There are at times outbreaks of malaria and stuff like that. So our people are resilient. The people of Western Odisha and Balangir are very resilient, and I'm sure they'll find the strength and courage and the dexterity to face these issues.
Your message to a lot of young people, the youth, which is right now looking at their future and which really seems uncertain. So many exams have been postponed, deferred, maybe cancelled. Jobs are going, unemployment maybe will really stare at us, in a large number. How would you really look at how do we deal with future?
I think it's a very tough years, some very tough years for us to come. You might have short-term booms in various commodities because of artificial shortages and everything else. But in over a period of a medium-term period of 2 to 4 years or 5 years, we have some tough economic years coming up ahead. The disease will end. We will at some point of time find a way of beating it, whether it's by way of vaccination or it's by way of possibly a cure. At some point in time, the disease will end and life will come back to normal. I think it's important that this experience teaches us what we want out of our lives, what we value out of our lives, and what we should be valued out of our lives. And I certainly hope it's inspired a lot of young people in my area to give back to their societies. Maybe it's in the villages or in the towns or in the locality, and to look for sources of livelihood which also have a better impact on society.
Two points I would really like you to also answer on is, one is that how it has also told us to have more empathy, whether we are leaders, whether we are educators, whether we are journalists or social workers or political representatives like you, and also as to how we should believe in planning a bit more so that we can really, be more prepared.
Absolutely. I think in this current scenario, it is really the common man, the citizen, the person on the road who's actually gotten out, whether as an individual or as a community, and help those in need. I mean, you had gurdwaras opening up in Delhi, you had mandirs opening up in places, masjids opening up places and giving spaces for people who are in need. So this is where communities have got together, individuals have got together and had a lot of empathy for each other and tried to help each other. And social media has played a huge role, especially in the more urban areas, and even in places Balangir and etc. So yes, even in these dark times, there have been glimmer of hope. There's been a glimmer of of inspiration which has come to us from individuals who empathize with complete strangers and gone out of their way to help these people. So, and I certainly hope this inspires or continues to inspire the youth of my area to look at society and look at their lives in a manner which has as much of a social impact as it does maybe a financial impact on themselves. And I certainly hope that the next time their local public representative comes to meet them, whether it's a sarpanch, a zira parishad, or a MLA, or a MP, or a minister, or whatever, I certainly hope they ask for better education and better health services. Two things that we are sorely lacking.
My last question to you, one has known you earlier when you handled things as a member of parliament, and you still are so committed to your people. Kalikesh, what is your message in terms of how, when we look at policies which you've done and you've looked at, how to really look for finances the right time, how to allocate things. For example, how we are redesigning, we are creating COVID care centers, we are shifting places and something else. So how to have innovative ideas to make things work?
I think one of the largest problems of the governments, and I'm not going to point out any one government here, is the manner in which they measure outcomes. So if they're talking about spending on education, they talk about the number of classrooms. If they're talking about spending on hospitals, they talk about the number of hospitals, buildings they've created, number of beds they've created. I mean, if you want to spend smartly, there's no reason why in times of crisis, a school building can't turn into a hospital, or a hospital, like in today's case, every school building could have been an isolation center or a hospital center, etc., or a panchayat house. So multi-use of fixed infrastructure with larger spending on software infrastructure or intelligent spending on infrastructure would be a much more valuable asset for governments. Number one. Number two, this one-upmanship between center and various states in a federal government should not exist. There shouldn't be a situation where the government of India says, look, we are doing a better job than you to the states. Or for that matter, the states saying, look, we are doing a better job than another state or the government of India. It is the joint responsibility of both the Union of India, as the government of India, as well as the state governments, to ensure that the lives of the citizens remain safe. They cannot and should not do politics on the dead bodies of the people of their states or of their country. This is just not acceptable, and I hope the voters make them realize that.
I'm so glad that these suggestions, these voices have come from you, because that's the whole idea here on Herbal India, that we are trying to bring in voices and suggestions also which can people benefit from, and we'll keep continuing to bring those ideas put forth. For example, all your suggestions, I'm sure people are looking at and will further watch on YouTube also, should be taken into consideration in terms of more understanding, learning from each other, then working. We have to walk the talk also. So I think this is the whole idea and aim, and I'm sure that you will still come out with more suggestions. You are on social media, you are talking to people, and these are only going to help others. Please keep doing that, Kalikesh, as we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Rakhi. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for all your very kind words.
Thank you so much to everyone for watching this. But Chandni, before he goes, do you have any question which I maybe forgot to ask you?
Yes, I do have a question, sir. Sir, I'm a lawyer, and I would actually really like to know your view on the courts in India taking sumo moto cognizance of the issues relating to COVID management and actually assuming the role of the government.
Yeah, so there is an issue of the three pillars of the Constitution always try to overreach into each other's territories. I have long held the view that the executive has decimated much of the legislature's check and balance powers that it has, and now the courts and executive are fighting over space. I don't think it's correct. I think every high court of every state cannot and should not get involved in day-to-day operations. Yes, if there are certain glaring issues or deficiencies, it must be taken to the court, and the courts must correct those issues. But It cannot be a regular and everyday practice that every day some high court or the other is coming up with suggestions on treatments. That's not the High Court's job. That's the job of the Indian medical fraternity. And I would be much happier if the High Court said, look, let the protocol of treatment be devised in the center and be transmitted on a daily basis to doctors by X technology or Y technology. I think that to me is a much better way of utilizing the court space. So yes, I'm wary of outreach. I think it doesn't do anything for our constitution, but let's not forget the courts also have an important role. And in the cases where governments, which are part of the executive, which try and ride roughshod over legislatures, it's time the court steps in at that point in time.
Okay.
Right.
Any last question? Then we'll have to wrap it up. If there are none, then I have already wished him all the best, and I would do that again. Mr. Dev, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Please support us. We are also growing, and we need everyone's suggestion here and their feedback, and we would look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rakhi. You're doing a fabulous job. Thank you. Keep it up.
Take care.
And your entire team.
Take care.